Check. Hello, everyone. Give everybody a minute to grab a seat. Good morning and welcome to Better Building by Design 2023. I'm Chris Gordon, Conference Chair with Efficiency Vermont. Thank you all for joining us today. We're looking forward to kicking off a great event full of learning and collaborating. Our theme this year is Mission to No Emissions, Connect, Create, and Innovate. We have a great agenda on tap. We're excited to have you here. Before I move on, I did want to take a moment to celebrate an important milestone. This year marks the 10-year anniversary of the Efficiency Excellence Network. 10 years ago, this network started as a group of HVAC and weatherization contractors. Today, we have 482 members, including architects, lighting designers, heat pump installers, electric vehicle dealers, and more. Many of our HVAC and weatherization members have been with us since the beginning, and they've grown with the network and our industry as it has grown. Thank you all for being here, whether you've been with the network for 1 year or all 10. A couple of housekeeping details. If you're looking for the password for Wi-Fi, that is meeting 1, capital M, meeting and number 1. This is our second year holding the conference in April. Excited to say that is going to continue. Despite the call for potentially a little bit of ice today in some parts of the state, I think it's going to be a better weather call moving forward. Please complete your session evaluations for each session. We really do value your input. It helps us to take stock of what you like and maybe what we could be working on for future events. And if you're seeking AIA or BPI credits, the process is going to be a little bit different this year. Down at the registration desk, you'll see a CEU credit form. Complete that form, and then you can drop off the top copy at registration on the last day of your attendance. And for AIA and BPI credits, we will register those for you. If you are seeking other CEU credits, you just keep the form for yourself, and you'll have that as a reference for the sessions you attended. Please share your thoughts on social media using hashtag BBD23. And this year we'll have a photo backdrop if you're interested in snapping a photo with EVT in the background. It's going to be down beside the EVT booth down in the lobby. And refreshments, looks like many of you have been downstairs, but if you're not aware, refreshments are downstairs in the exhibit hall throughout the event. And also encourage you to speak with our sponsors and exhibitors who are showcasing innovative projects to help you with your decarb goals. We do have a couple of schedule adjustments as well to note. The Hitchhiker's Guide to Electrifying Your Multifamily Building in the first session block, which is right after the keynote, that is canceled today, and we're moving Choose the Right Heat Pumps, Evaluating Performance and Heating Costs to Emerald 3. And taking its place in Diamond 1 is going to be an introduction to indoor air quality. And tomorrow, in the last session block before the plenary, how indoor environments can support occupant health has been canceled, and in its place, we're going to have a session on ground source heat pumps in the amphitheater. So please note those two session changes. I think the Whova app has been updated accordingly. And thanks to our many speakers, sponsors and exhibitors, and to Marie Romanelli and her team at Delaney Event Management, and to the EVT Conference Coordinating Committee for making this conference possible. I wanted to give a special thanks to our diamond and platinum level sponsors, Samsung, VEIC, ABCO, Anderson Windows and Doors, and VGS. And I'd like to welcome Peter Walk, Managing Director at Efficiency Vermont, to provide some opening remarks, as well as announcing our Best of the Best award winners and introduce our keynote speaker. And if you are one of the Best winners, please meet in the hallway behind those doors in the corner where the hallways meet. We're going to do some photos, and you can receive your awards there. Hand it over to Peter. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. It's wonderful to be here with you all today. Last year, I got to attend this kind of as an interloper. I was about 5 days before starting at Efficiency Vermont, and somebody made the suggestion that I come and at least introduce myself. So it's nice to be here with you in full this year. I'd like to thank Chris and the entire team at EVT for putting together such a great conference. This is a wonderful opportunity for us all to get together and gather and learn as our industry continues to evolve and we with it. You may notice that there seemed to be something missing from this year's conference. We changed the title from Better Buildings by Design to Better Building by Design. Buildings evoke the familiar, something that we're used to, the construction of our houses and buildings and businesses and other structures. But what we're thinking about now is how do we build from the ground up? How do we build in a way that is sustainable for the future of Vermont, for everybody who lives here, and so that we can provide the safe, clean, affordable homes that all Vermonters need in order to live and thrive in our state. We have the people necessary in this room today and the ideas in order to be able to achieve that vision, and we must work together. As Chris mentioned, the title for today's event is Mission to No Emissions. Connect, create, and innovate. When we normally think about innovation, we think about shiny and new technology, things that we want to achieve by moving forward. What if we slowed down? What if we looked back? What if we connected? I ask you to think about today, to think about innovating new ways to connect with all possible customers in Vermont, be they businesses or residents. I ask you to think about new pathways that we can create to help folks access existing technology. The map on the right side of your screen represents the Efficiency Vermont's Energy Burden Report. It shows how energy costs impact communities across the state differently and impact the households that pay those bills. To be successful in meeting the state's ambitious climate goals, we need to help all families make the transition. That is the critical piece. If we are aiming to get to 90% emissions reductions by 2050, that's everybody. We cannot leave people behind. So we must look to see how we go from burden to helping them benefit from a more efficient, clean energy future. In this year's conference, you'll see a theme of equity and access. Today, there will be a couple of different events for you to see. One is from the folks that we've been working with at a company called Ideas Generation that looks at inclusion, diversity, equity, access, and social justice issues in this space. Encourage you to attend that event. Additionally, there'll be a discussion about how do we confront workforce challenges in this industry. Tomorrow, there'll be an opportunity to talk about building homes for socially disadvantaged populations and a workshop on how to confront and act on systemic bias and systemic and implicit bias in our industry. There's a DEI tag that you can follow to follow that track, but I would encourage you to bring that mindset to all of the work that we're doing here today and all the learning opportunities we have. How do we expand the access and reach of all of the things that we're trying to accomplish so that everybody can participate in this process? At the same time, I know we're at a moment in this industry where there is the combined challenge of a lot of work to do and a lot of money coming in, both from the state and federal government, and the challenges that we all know and face in the workforce. In this October, we asked the Efficiency Excellence Network members to share what you were feeling and what you were seeing. This is some of the things that we heard from you. 72% of you reported trouble finding staff. 86% of those who were taking on new projects were still turning down projects because even after adding staff. 90% of our partners in the supply chain are reporting significant disruptions. And more than half of all the contractors in the network were reporting booking more than 3 months out to 10+ months out projects around the state. We know we're at a challenging moment. We know there's more coming. Our customers are facing that level of uncertainty too. High inflation, high interest rates, equipment costs going up, and then the potential of those federal dollars, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the promise of new incentives. So when's the right time for me to as a homeowner, to take on the project that I want to take on? All of that is adding to challenges within our piece. At the same time, some of the state goals around this industry would anticipate significant growth in the workforce. So how are we going to get there? What are we trying to accomplish? We know it's not just a financial problem, that we've got to get together and figure out, how do we grow this industry? How do we introduce people to these good paying, interesting jobs? In 2021, EVT led a workforce task force that identified 5 major barriers to this challenge. And none of them will come as a surprise to you. Many of them are systemic in nature, such as the lack of affordable housing in Vermont. And our focus as a society on the value of a 4-year college education that may or may not be the right approach for every student. These are not problems that are unique to our industry, but we're going to continue to work to solve them. Some of the things that we've been working to address are to provide building performance institutes, building analysis training for all EEN members, for current employees and new employees. And I'm excited to see we've been making progress on a grant we received from the Department of Energy at the federal level with the state's Office of Economic Opportunity, which runs the state-run weatherization program, to explore building a weatherization workforce training center here in Vermont. Next slide. Good news is, we know this work is hard. We know there are challenges in front of us, but it is worth it. We have seen that over the years. Since 2000, the lifetime savings associated with the work that we have all done together is more than $3 billion. That is money back in Vermonters' pockets. Vermont bills are 38% lower. Electric bills are 38% lower than the national average. This industry employs 9,832 workers across the state, many of whom work for the 482 businesses in the Efficiency Excellence Network. And I would be remiss if I didn't say congratulations again on 10 years together. Next slide. All right, before we get into the best of the best winners here, I did want to take a moment to thank our newly retired Senator Patrick Leahy. As many of you know, he was a key supporter of energy efficiency and the work we all do together over the years. And one of the final acts that he accomplished before he retired was to include a small amount in the omnibus spending bill that passed in December that gave us more resources to be able to sit down with low and moderate income families in Vermont to help them achieve their energy goals. So really excited and thankful for his work over the years, and I know that our new congressional delegation is going to continue that work and supporting Vermont and helping bring the resources that we need to be successful. With that, I would like us to take some time to honor some of the leaders we have identified in this space. Really excited about the work that's been accomplished, and I would like you to be with me for a moment to honor some of these winners. I will say, since there are a number of awards to go through, I would ask you to hold your applause until the end and encourage you to look at all the posters that will describe these projects that will be in the main hallways outside the ballroom, and congratulate those winners when you see them through the conference. Next slide. Our first category is residential new construction. The winner of the Residential New Construction Best of the Best Award, showing a comprehensive approach to energy-efficient new construction, is Christopher and Amy Carey's Cornwall home. The project and partners include Sheehan Construction and Vermont Integrated Architecture. The home takes full advantage of the sun with solar panels and passive solar design and features elements to maximize the health of occupants. Next slide. The winner of the Residential New Construction Affordability Award, demonstrating affordable construction and estimated energy costs, is Peter Stone's Stonewood Farms in Orwell, Vermont. Projects and partners include Pilmaharm Architects, True Engineering, and Harvestar. This housing provides farm workers a comfortable, energy-efficient, healthy, and affordable living space. Next slide. The winner of the Residential New Construction Home Award, Healthy Home Award, demonstrating a commitment to healthy home principles, is Turnkey Builders' Morningside Drive project in Charlotte, Vermont. Project designer Will Brown balanced aesthetic and comfort with home health, sustainability, and efficiency. He used a technique he learned at the 2020 BBD conference to create a safe and healthy airtight envelope. The commercial building design and construction winners all demonstrate a comprehensive whole building approach to efficiency that meets the client and site's needs. They maximize cost effectiveness and economic benefits, and they consider the overall sustainability of the project, including non-energy benefits. The winner of the CEA Cannabis Cultivation Facility Award is the Clean Cannabis Company's cultivation facility in Hardwick. The building benefits from superior thermal envelope and all-electric design featuring 20 cold climate heat pumps for heating and cooling. The winner of the Small New Construction Award is Tri-Valley Transit's Upper Valley Community Transit Center in Bradford, designed by Black River Design. The building features efficient, radiant floor heating, passive solar design, and heat recovery ventilation. The winner of the Large New Construction Award is the City of South Burlington City Hall, Library and Senior Center, designed by Weyman Lamphere Architects. The building benefits from a geothermal heat pump system for heating and cooling, as well as on-site solar. The winner of the Small Renovation Award is the Springfield Food Co-op in Springfield. The revamped building will benefit from an upgraded refrigeration system, improved air sealing and insulation, and LED lighting throughout. Next up, we have Efficiency Excellence Network Awards. These awards recognize EN members who go above and beyond in service of the network, their customers, and their colleagues. The Partner of the Year goes to a company with a track record of positive customer interactions and a commitment to the principles and concepts needed to advance energy efficiency. This year's Partner of the Year is Vermont Foam Insulation in Chester. The Leadership Award goes to an individual at the cutting edge of innovation, someone who is willing to try something new and help bring their colleagues to the table. They are committed to advancing energy efficiency and integrating solutions into their projects to support customers. This year's Leadership Award goes to Tim Jeffers of Al Jeffers & Son in Townsend. Please join me in congratulating this year's Best of the Best Award winners. And as a reminder to what Chris said, please join us out in the corner after our keynote speaker for some pictures. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Sarah Waring. Sarah's career has been focused on community development and natural resource management and looking at how to collaborate and build whole system approaches. She is currently the state director at the USDA Rural Development for Vermont and New Hampshire. Why a state director covers 2 states, I'm not entirely sure, but we'll talk about that later. She's previously held positions at Vermont Community Foundation, the Council on Rural Development, the Farm and Wilderness Foundation, the Sonoran Institute, and the Center for an Agricultural Economy. She was asked to serve on the governor's 2020 Task Force for Economic Mitigation and Recovery, where she helped spearhead a toolkit for municipalities to address DEI challenges. Sarah brings hard work, bringing together communities to address the often just deep-seated systemic challenges that we know we face in Vermont. She comes to that naturally. She grew up in the Northeast Kingdom with a family who liked to, shall we say, tinker with energy projects. Her dad for a living, installed solar panels and other alternative energy, but the family liked to try to see if they could concoct, maybe concoct is a mean word to say it, but a way to make a water wheel to lever additional power to their home. Ultimately, they were unsuccessful, but I think they enjoyed the process along the way. Sarah has also taken a 1954 International pickup truck and turned it into an electric vehicle. She likes to get her hands dirty, and she's not afraid of it. She is my favorite kind of public servant. She brings a willingness to identify challenges, to bring people along, and to come together and roll up their sleeves to solve those intrinsic challenges. So please join me in a warm welcome to Sarah Waring.
There were definitely pieces of water wheel in our stream growing up every few years when my dad's inventions would just, fall apart after the spring thaw. Oh, thank you, Chris. There we go. And let's go back to that first one. There we go. Can't show them the last slide first. Give away all my secrets. Okay, awesome. So thank you, Peter. And thank you to Efficiency Vermont for the day. Thanks to Bryn and to Chris in particular for helping me to get ready for today. And thanks to all of you for coming to this conference. I have to say, it's inspirational to be in a room with so many people who are improving the quality of life for Vermont families and for your clients. Your work matters locally, but it also matters globally. And it's really neat to be in a room with this many of you who are making a difference for our state and also for the world. So thanks to all of you for the work you do. Now, last year you had a keynote speaker who left you with a mantra about managing for energy and moisture. And he also started off by talking about all of his qualifications to be a keynote speaker. How many of you remember the keynote speaker from last year? He also could sing, and he was doing juggling, right? And he predicted the future. I think he played the guitar for you at the end, right? I am not going to do any of those things. I apologize in advance. My only claim to fame during a speech is that I once fell off a stage backwards. I hope that I don't have to do that to impress you this morning. But what I am here to do today is to set the stage for you. Nice. The theme is a mission to no emissions and how we can work together to achieve progress towards decarbonization, even when our issues are so complex. I was really struck by the relevance for me of the subtitle to this conference today. And what I hope to emphasize in my keynote speech is the importance of the human relationships and the interactions that we have with each other, really the process of how we get this big goal done. I want to start by laying some groundwork that I think most of us at this conference can probably agree with. We face an incredibly intimidating challenge in addressing the impacts of and preparing for climate change and striving to reach decarbonization. It is not the science or the technology that is holding us back from this goal. It is our policies and our politics and our human consumption patterns and our culture nationwide. It's disagreement about how to move a society from one energy source into a new and different energy future. It's about the energy industry, it's about our workforce, it's about the strategy and who bears the brunt of it. It's about those methods for reaching that desired state. Do we tax? Do we incentivize? Do we subsidize? What is fair and who receives what benefits? And who are we leaving behind? How do we move faster with mandates, or do we let the market decide? And which is best for us today, but which might be best for our children and our grandchildren in the future? So before I dive into this, let me tell you a little bit about my job. First of all, the United States Department of Agriculture is huge. We are the second largest domestic federal department after the Postal Service. So we have staff in every state, on the ground, everywhere around the country. We are something like the country's 13th largest bank. We do We fight wildfires. We do food insecurity and food benefits, supplemental nutrition assistance, food stamps. We do climate research. We do crop insurance. We do disaster funding. There's probably not very much that the USDA does not fund. Now, my agency within the USDA is called Rural Development. We're one of 8 mission areas. And our mission is to increase economic opportunity and improve the quality of life for rural Americans. And we do that in 3 ways. The first way is housing. We support home ownership for families and individuals. And we also support multifamily housing development. Then we work with small businesses, and that includes farmers and working lands enterprises, to help them grow and increase their market share. And then finally, we work with rural communities on their infrastructure and their essential facilities. So this is broadband, telecom, electricity, wastewater, and then things like community halls and town halls and libraries and hospitals and child care centers and schools. Within USDA, we are probably one of the most broadly focused agencies, which means that our customers, our clients are individuals, nonprofits, for-profits, municipalities, fire districts, small-scale government, state government, institutes of higher education, tribal agencies, right? You get the idea. Sometimes we get to underwrite a $17 million loan to a rural hospital, like we did in St. Johnsbury a few weeks ago at NVRH. Sometimes we are helping to support the financing of a wastewater treatment facility that's bringing in a methane digester and working on an organics to energy project like we do in Montpelier. Sometimes we are working with an individual homeowner to get that person weatherization and to upgrade their own facility, their own residence. And then sometimes we're helping a farmer to put solar panels on a barn to reduce their own energy burden and reduce their costs. But most of the time we're doing all of these things all at once, all at the same time. And under the Biden-Harris administration, we now have put climate change at the center of the government's agenda and changed the way we are doing funding. So at the USDA, what that means is that billions of dollars are going into climate-smart agriculture and forestry and partnerships around soil and water conservation. Billions more dollars are going into upgrading our electrical grid and creating a distributed and efficient and renewable energy generation mix. Billions more are going to go into the acceleration of decarbonization projects for energy-intensive industries and manufacturing. And because we know that government itself, because it's so big, can help to drive change as a consumer, our government agencies are charged with buying zero-emission vehicles, and when we upgrade our own facilities, to do it with an eye towards energy and water efficiency. And we are now charged to procure all of our materials through government contracts with a federal Buy Clean initiative. So this work is happening inside the federal government, but it's also happening in the spending bills that Peter mentioned and that you'll get to hear about during the conference. The Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law are 2 examples of really incredible pieces of legislation and resources that are getting rolled out slowly across the country. And during this conference, you'll get to hear more about the Inflation Reduction Act. You'll also get to hear, and I saw it right around the corner, about the Winooski School Project, which is a project that we put $58 million into and is just around the corner in Winooski. But just because we have all of these historic new funding resources that are going to change our industries and help our businesses and help our energy use, it doesn't mean we can flip the switch and implement these things. People still have to apply. And I don't know how many of you have applied for federal grants recently, but they are painful and onerous to apply for. There is a lot of process behind managing public dollars. And that doesn't even include historic preservation and Act 250 and many of the things that are state processes. So the question is, how do we get from where we are today to utilizing these funds and getting to the place where we'd really like to be tomorrow in thinking about no emissions and decarbonization? So to start us off, I want to think about a single opportunity. There we go. And apologies if you can't see this from way in the back. I'll tell you what the bottom line is. I want to think about a single opportunity that I hear about everywhere I go between my two states. And yes, Peter, I do have two states, even though I am a state director. There are 47 state directors for rural development across the country, and it's only on the East Coast that we get a couple of multiple states because our states are really small compared to the ones out west. So wherever I go in Vermont and New Hampshire, I hear about housing. Housing, lack of affordable housing, lack of available housing, housing stock, housing prices, housing development. Now, I'm always impressed with the data that our friends at the Vermont Housing Finance Agency put together, and I've stolen these data with permission from Seth Leonard and one of his presentations. From this graphic, you can see that they have gone further than thinking just about the number of new units. They are also thinking about housing Vermonters who are currently experiencing homelessness, and they are thinking about a healthy vacancy rate for housing, and they are thinking about those houses that are going to become inhabitable and how to turn those over. Their estimate is that by 2030, we need upwards of 40,000 new units split between rentals and homeownership. Now imagine, this is an incredible opportunity for green and clean building, for net zero building practices, and we know the solution, and we can even quantify the opportunity. But it doesn't mean that it's a simple problem. I loved your graphic, Peter, about how many of you are struggling with workforce, right? So my question was going to be, do you have workforce struggles in your own company? And are you struggling to fill vacancies or take on new projects? Does Vermont even have enough builders and developers to meet this opportunity, especially those that are used to navigating a complex capital stack and doing things that include state and federal funding? Will Vermont's permitting ecosystem allow you to build these developments easily and optimally? Will municipalities incentivize growth and development in healthy, walkable downtowns? Or are these 40,000 units going to be sprawled out across our countryside? And then, how much time are we going to take to answer these questions while people get jobs in other parts of the country and don't move to Vermont because there are no houses here for them to live in? My point is, it's a simple problem, but it's actually a really complicated problem because of all the systems challenges that are embedded in simply meeting this business opportunity. So I want to talk a little bit about complex systems, and I want to talk a little bit about systems change today. A system is a purposeful collection of interrelated components that work together to achieve a single outcome. So a complex system can be the human body, it can be a coral reef, or it can be like the Federal Reserve banking system, which nobody really understands. Usually, there's no practical way except maybe Ken, you might understand the Federal Reserve banking system. There's no practical way to study causality in a complex system or to deduce behavior from exact rules. So instead, we have to look at patterns of behavior over time. Now, because I am a visual person, I did an internet search for images of complex systems, and I'm going to show you a couple of them. This first one is a diagram of the global food system. You can see, well, you can't read it, so I'm going to show it for you instead. There are governance and funding streams. There are consumers and farmers and truckers across the middle. On the bottom somewhere is water and energy and soil nutrients. Then there are consumption patterns and behaviors and how we eat, right? But the point is, none of these pieces interact in this system without an impact on some other part of the system somewhere. This next one, yeah, thank you. I appreciate the laugh. This next one is a map of the interventions and activities that can influence behavior in preventing or changing obesity. You can see there are clumps of circles of things here. One is social psychology, one is individual psychology, individual activity, food consumption patterns, and so on. But again, all of these things are interrelated in how it takes a single person to overcome a challenge in their own lives that is a behavioral challenge. Here's one that relates more directly to our conference today. They even tried to separate it out into layers to make it a little bit easier to digest. The bottom is energy distribution and demand. Then you move up a layer and there's generation and transmission and infrastructure. And then the economics, the macroeconomics, and the policy that impact our behavior patterns of consumption, but still really complicated to make a change in a single part of this system without being able to anticipate and plan for all those other cascading impacts that are going to happen. Now, whenever I get a little bit depressed about thinking about a big thorny problem, this is the one that I like the best because it just reminds me that I can't control anything and it's all very complicated. All of this that I'm showing is just really to illustrate how challenging it can be to create a reference point and to work towards a single goal. But there is a way to identify and to think about systems change and how to interact with complex systems. And generally, complex systems have a couple of characteristics. One, they're difficult to model, as you've seen. Second, they are known as a whole system because they exhibit collective behaviors that the parts of the system on their own don't necessarily exhibit. And then they have a few distinct properties that identify their level of complexity. And I'm going to talk about those properties because I think those are some of the keys to creating and connecting and innovating that you want to do together this week. The first characteristic of a complex system is a network. So a network is a collection of discrete objects, right, with relationships between those objects. If you took the relationships in this room today, we would all be connected because we are here at this conference on this day. And then second, many of you have been here before at these conferences. Then you're a part of the EEN, right? Thank you. The EEN network, so that connects you. And then maybe many of you have actually done deals together or completed projects together or have transactional relationships, so that connects you even further. So the networks within a system are stronger or weaker depending on those relationships. Next is nonlinearity. Complex systems have nonlinearity. And this means that you can generate the same input twice into the system, but you cannot predict that it will have the same result. So think about our current banking crisis, or think about inflation rates. With the same financial conditions, we as humans are making different choices depending on the time and the other conditions that exist around us. Or if you want to do an ecosystem example, think about a coral reef. Even though you can predict in general the way a coral reef works, you can't necessarily predict what will happen in one spot all the time correctly every time. Another characteristic is emergence. Now, this is when a new trait emerges from a system because of the interactive relationships that exist between the parts of the system. But if you took one part of that system out, that emergent characteristic would not be evident. The easiest way that I like to think about this is like a beehive or an ant colony. One single insect by itself does not give you a sense that as a whole, the colony defends itself, finds food, takes care of its young, harvests leaves, whatever it's doing, right? But one ant or one bee doesn't do that on its own. So only when you put that system together are those emergent properties evident. And then the last one is spontaneous order. So this is about self-organization within a system. This happens when all of the parts of a system move together without centralized command or control. And this is probably most evident in like flocking or schooling behavior with fish, right? Some external stimulus, all of the individuals move the same way and act in a way that is beneficial to them, even though no one fish is saying, yo, turn this way, shark, right? So they're all doing it together. And I think a lot about how social media helps us as humans act in this spontaneous order sort of way. Now, what I would propose to all of you is that you are here and you are a part of a complex system that relates to our global energy use, our patterns of consumption, and the way we live on our landscape and on our Earth. Striving to reach decarbonization, no matter what your motivation for doing so, can be done at home with your own choices on your own time. But we all know that individual actions aren't going to get us there. So what I want to do is share a couple of examples where people have organized and gone beyond individual actions to tackle some of these big, thorny problems, and how those relationships are really critical in moving a whole system forward and creating systems change. The first example that I want to talk about is also perhaps one of the most sophisticated that we've seen, one that Vermont actually gets quite a lot of credit for nationwide. How many of you know about Vermont's farm-to-plate plan and network? Yeah, great. Okay. So this came about because in 2008 and 2009, our dairy industry was in deep into a multi-year milk price crisis. The economic recession was happening, right? So inflation rates were rising, our supply chain was getting expensive, and we were faced with a really uncertain future for our largest working land enterprise businesses, our dairy farms, the ones that take up the most land on our landscape, and the ones that had helped sustain for decades an ancillary system of small businesses in our communities. Dairy farms have been responsible really for keeping machine shops and feed stores and local trucking companies in business. But at the same time, Vermont's local food movement was on the rise. We were seeing small-scale diversified farming operations becoming more popular. This was coinciding often with a branded name and a story and a value. And Vermont was becoming the place to reconnect with your food and to buy local and to feel proud of your local food supply chain. These two phenomena were connected, along with some national trends around purchasing and consumption patterns, where consumers were demanding to know more about their product and to know the story and the people and the history of the supply chain behind their product. At the same time, Vermont had just completed a study that had identified working landscapes as one of our key common values. So in 2009, our legislature put together funding to support a planning process that focused on a local food system, that identified it and quantified it, and then asked us to grow it with investment over time. And this public investment was matched with philanthropic dollars. The first 10-year plan was created after a year of listening and learning, and they came up with 33 goals and 80 metric measurable outcomes. But the goals were things like increased local food production, increased consumer awareness, increased number of jobs across the food system, and farm viability and food security. These were all embedded in the original plan, but obviously no one agency and no one organization can do all of these things by itself. So the backbone organization, the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund, created a collective impact model and a network. And this network was cross-sectoral. The Jobs Fund itself does the facilitation, gathers the data, continues to raise money for research and for projects, and to keep this network alive and thriving and moving forward. They also make the case every year to Vermonters and to our legislature that this all-in approach is worthwhile and making a difference. Every year they produce a report that tracks things like greenhouse gas emissions, numbers of acres in production, numbers of jobs, the changing rates of food insecurity, and so on. I'm going to read briefly a summary from the J.P. Kendall Foundation, which was one of the funders of their work, and this was just after the first 5 years of the Farm to Plate strategic plan. The Farm to Plate strategic plan has been called the most comprehensive food plan in the United States and has achieved tremendous results in the past 5 years. Between 2009 and 2015, more than 6,000 new food jobs have been added in Vermont. The net value of food manufacturing in the state now totals $1 billion, up 58% from 2004. Total food system gross sales are up 32% from 2007, currently around $10 billion. And local food consumption by Vermonters has risen 5% in 2010 to 6.9% in 2014. Staff credit the concept of shared leadership, trust and relationship building, and enhanced collaboration for the growth that they've seen in the Vermont food system. By convening people and starting conversations, the state of Vermont has more unity and innovation than ever, and now stands as a powerful example of how, with the right framework, food systems change is achievable. Great stuff, right? Good example. I want to switch now to another problem in a different complex system, and this one is about housing, and in particular manufactured housing and manufactured housing communities. Now, according to a 2019 American Housing Survey data, Over 6.7 million households across the country live in manufactured housing, compared with 4.5% who live in multifamily housing. For a long time, manufactured housing has provided affordable options for residents who are more likely to have low incomes, more likely to have disabilities, more likely to be 65 or older, and more likely to have lower educational attainment than the rest of our population. But manufactured housing communities, or mobile home parks, have had a bad rap for a long time. The American Planning Association attributes that to a few specific criticisms that have been perpetuated over the years. Manufactured housing itself is often substandard, and residents often have a higher energy burden than folks in stick-built houses. Manufactured housing communities themselves often suffer from exploitative landlord relationships and arrangements. Manufactured housing is 14% of rural America's housing, but only 6% of urban America's housing, and therefore doesn't get a lot of the attention that it might deserve. And they are clustered but low density and often disconnected from surrounding communities. And sadly, they are often examples of environmental justice or environmental injustice at work. Manufactured housing communities are often situated near airports, near wastewater treatment plants, in the flood zones, and they are not in our prime walkable real estate. Now, manufactured housing communities are also a business, right? So the landlord owns the property, owns the land, creates the infrastructure, designs the services, and you bring your house, you buy your house, and you pay for all those things with a lot fee. But frequently, landlords underinvest in that infrastructure. They raise lot fees, or they even evict residents without much resident protection. Now, in theory, these communities could be high-end housing communities with incredible climate-resilient infrastructure, but instead they conjure up images of trailer parks from the 1970s and 80s. But a lot of that is changing because of external pressures in the system, the cost of housing being one of them. There is also a growing recognition that manufactured housing communities can present some really innovative potentials in climate adaptation. I want to talk about, you all probably know, obviously, about various designs, passive designs, net zero designs for actual manufactured houses. But what I want to talk about is the business model for the communities themselves and resident-owned communities, or ROCs. In the case of ROCs, instead of a single landlord, the residents themselves buy the land and own their community. Collectively, they manage the infrastructure and they set the lot fees and they invest in their own wastewater and services and so on. So here's what's great about a ROC. A recent study by Colliers indicated that ROCs operate at or below market rate rates, lot fees. The average annual rent increase in a study across 36 ROCs showed that they only increased their lot fees by 0.9% a year, while the market rate is 3.9% a year. ROCs are also shown to invest more in their own infrastructure over time. Now, housing stability and security are obviously one of the first priorities for these cooperative businesses because it has to be affordable for folks to live there, but they also are investing in and choosing infrastructure that improves their quality of life. And in Vermont and in New Hampshire, I have to keep saying New Hampshire just because Peter made fun of me for it, due to long-standing work of a couple of great service organizations and the fact that our laws allow residents a window of opportunity to buy their own community, our ROCs are now going beyond to invest in community solar, smart grid technologies, energy storage capacity, stormwater and wastewater. It's really incredible to see the response that local communities can do when they have ownership of their own land. Now, across the country, this has really taken off. There is an entity called ROC USA that supports this across the country, and part of what ROC USA is doing is raising capital to allow a lending relationship with any individual ROC that wants to buy their own community. So it's a really incredible model, and it's in part because of all these external stimuli in the system. Now I'm going to go way away from this industry and give you one more example. My third example is philanthropy. So we think of it classically as something as really good, right? People with means, people with wealth, giving away their money to good charitable causes. But it is actually true that of the billions of dollars that are given away every year in philanthropy, the majority goes to churches and institutes of higher education. They go to existing institutions. They are not necessarily going to solve some of the world's biggest challenges. And philanthropy has a lot of power. According to Giving USA, which is a nonprofit that tracks philanthropic giving, in 2020, Americans gave $471 billion to charitable causes. And in 2021, it was even more. Now, about 10 years ago, people started to think about how and why philanthropy operated the way it does. And an article in the Stanford Social Innovation Review by a woman named Kavata Ramdas outlined two of the biggest challenges for philanthropy in trying to actually address some of our root causes of environmental or social or economic injustices. She wrote that there were two contradictions in the philanthropic model that makes philanthropy poorly suited to actually make change in the world at the grassroots level. First, the more inequitable or unequal our distribution of wealth gets, the more we create a class of people who benefit from that inequity. People are often encouraged or celebrated when they give money away or give it back. But the contradiction, she wrote, was that they are benefiting from a system in which it is actually okay for an individual to have a higher net worth than an entire country, and that is a skewed system. She also wrote that the second contradiction was that the global north, with our industrial agriculture, our excessive dependence on fossil fuels, our poor health outcomes, is the dominant culture that spreads and imposes our development practices on the rest of the world, including through our philanthropic giving. In other words, we become the model for best practice, and when we are funding other changes across the world, our model becomes the understood change for a better way of life. So this movement has grown up. This movement is called social change philanthropy. And the idea here is don't give to institutions and some of the big players who have always received philanthropic dollars, but give to grassroots organizations, give to community organizing, and try to shift the power dynamic in philanthropy. Focus on those root causes of social and environmental and economic injustices. Make philanthropy more accessible, more diverse, make it more transparent, and make it more responsive and relational over time. So foundations now have new leaders, diverse leaders. They are trying to put folks with lived experience in leadership positions. And they are not just giving their money, but also their time and their relationships and their skills. I'm going to read a quote from the same journal from 2018 entitled "Complex Systems Change Starts with Those Who Use the Systems." And it says, "We believe that the most effective way to promote systems-level social change is to place the voices of people who use those social systems, people for whom change matters most, at the center of change processes. But while many philanthropic organizations tout the importance of listening to the end beneficiaries or the service users, the practice nevertheless remains an underutilized methodology for countering systemic obstacles to change and ultimately reforming complex systems." The entity at the bottom here, resource generation, is something I encourage you to look up. This is a fascinating model and a part of the social change philanthropy movement. It is a group of young people between the ages of 18 to 35 who have self-identified that they have class or wealth privilege, and they are dedicated to redistributing wealth and land and power. But they are not a single centralized entity. They are chapters in states all around the country doing this work at the grassroots level. It's a really cool model. Now this last one, there we go. This last one, Bryn and Chris told me you actually had a presentation on this last year, which is great, so I'm going to spend very little time on this. But as I was doing my homework on this, I read through the recent report from Toronto and the Builders for Climate Action, Achieving Real Net Zero Emission Homes, which helped me to understand the difference between operational carbon in a building and embodied carbon and the upstream carbon emissions. The report itself creates these tiers of building materials and then rates carbon emissions and identifies opportunities and challenges for that upstream carbon process. And the Builders for Climate Action have created this BEAM estimator tool, Building Emissions Accounting for Materials, BEAM, which helps to encourage change in the building industry by allowing you to track exactly what it looks like when you are bringing in a certain material for your building project. And that kind of resource sharing, right, creating a tool that can change behavior over time is the potential for systems change. This is exactly the kind of tool that is needed to share through an industry to encourage a new pattern of behavior. So, what do all of these things have in common? How do we begin to get it done? And what are some of the takeaways? Each of these initiatives that I have shared today have been in the works for years, and they all have emerging and nascent and closing projects. There are projects in all of these concepts that have sprung up and that have died, right? Individual ants die, bees die, coral reef breaks off and dies. It's okay, the point is it's okay when an individual project in a complex system, when an individual piece of it doesn't last, that is also okay, it's part of the evolution. The complex system also, that self-organization that we were talking about, is about this sharing of resources, sharing of tools, making sure that you are not isolated in your sector, but that you can organize cross-sectorally and that you don't find yourself sort of categorized. In some of these cases, it's also about changing leadership, right? Which is a part of equitable access and a part of thinking about how we think differently about our problems. New leadership, but just as importantly, leadership that is ready for new ideas is really important in addressing systems change. Leadership is a process as much as it is about decision making. And what I have seen is that when leadership stays focused on a process that includes and changes over time, and moreover allows for collaborative or even consensus-based decision-making, then the ability to do systems change is stronger, and it's greater. And finally, the commonality across all of these that I'm most excited about is the movement away from simple transactional relationships towards interactive relationships. So if we're going to tackle complex systems change, we need to think ourselves about complex reciprocity. From the examples today, the individuals within those systems, the residents of a rock, the network participants at Farm to Plate, or those social change philanthropy champions, they are not just working together to get a bill passed, or to complete a deal, or to finalize a project. Because they're tackling something much bigger, they are trying to support each other in many ways. They're exchanging time and energy and tools and support and knowledge, and yes, also money and outcomes, right? But we need to think of ourselves a little bit more like a coral reef and a little bit less like just economic partners. So, I promise I'm almost done. You know that when a picture of kids comes up, they're almost done. The next steps obviously are go get a maple creamy and take a break. No, just kidding. The last thing that I want to leave you with is just a story about my 6-year-old and how I think all of you in this room can continue your work, your day-to-day jobs, but also contribute to this sort of complex systems change. So I was getting in the car the other day with my 6-year-old, and I had a car phone charger in my hand, but it had a cigarette lighter on the end of it instead of, a USB port. And my son asked me what it was, and I said, it's a car phone charger. And he said, why does it have that different end? And I said, oh, because I'm going to plug it into the cigarette lighter. And he said, what's a cigarette lighter? So then, of course, I had to explain, right, the heat and electricity, and you could plug this in to get electricity, or you could put in the heating element, and then you could start a fire and smoke your cigarette in your car. And I think that his takeaway was basically like, yuck, smoking. Like, I think that's as far as I got with my 6-year-old. But my epiphany in that little story, right, was that our next generation needs to learn about technology changes. It is vital for them to learn about energy and electricity and thermodynamics and physics and all of the things that you all do every day. So I leave you with this because I think it is one simple way that you're probably going beyond your day jobs and contributing to systems change as a whole. You are probably already teaching your clients, your kids, other people's kids, and the rest of us about how energy works and about how heat works and about how it can work better and cleaner and more efficiently. When we connect with each other, when we create more relationships together, we can do that innovation, right? So you have incredible knowledge. Your knowledge is incredibly valuable. I encourage you to translate it to the rest of us. I can only go as far as a cigarette lighter, but you all can go a lot further and share it so that we can be better and we all can make better choices together. So thank you, and I am excited to be here with you today and tomorrow at the conference. Enjoy your time.